Just so everybody knows, I'm having technical difficulties. This is Rachel speaking. My camera is not working for some reason. So I'm just a voice introducing Jenel. All right, so welcome everybody to Accessibility for Arts Organizations with Jenel Shaw. My name is Rachel Andrewchuk, and I am the Training Programs Manager at Creative Manitoba. I'd like to first acknowledge that Creative Manitoba and Arts Accessibility Network Manitoba are located on Treaty 1 territory, the original lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. We also acknowledge that our water is sourced from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation. We acknowledge and pay respect to the ancestors and treaties made on these lands by considering all our cultures, traditions, and the histories of colonialism, dispossession, and resistance as we create and learn together. Today is our last workshop in the Creative Accessibility series, so a big thank you to Jenel for all your hard work helping planning and organizing the series. It's been superb. So with that, I will introduce Jenel, who is leading today's discussion. Jenel Shaw is a visual artist and dedicated advocate for deaf and disabled artists. Shaw earned her master's degree in disability studies at the University of Manitoba. Her dissertation, an autoethnological study of art as a tool of empowerment, examined her own experiences with art and mental illness. Shaw previously worked at Mentoring Artists for Women's Art as their first student intern during her undergrad. Currently, she is the Executive Director of Arts Accessibility Network Manitoba and the Liaison Director for the Manitoba Cultural Society of the Deaf. All right, I'll pass it over to you, Jenel.
Great, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Rachel. Okay, so I'm just gonna turn off everyone's videos. Okay, good. We're ready to go. So just so everybody knows ahead of time, don't worry about taking notes, just listen and relax. When we send out the recording link, there's going to be a resource handout for you guys, as well as all, the brief summary of all the accessibility notes that I'm giving. So just, relax and enjoy. Right, so before we begin, I'd like to let you know a little bit more about myself so you can understand why accessibility is so important for me. I was diagnosed with chronic depression and borderline personality disorder after my first day at a psychiatric ward in the hospital in my early 20s, back in the early 2000s. At the time, I felt a lot of shame and guilt over my diagnosis. I was working at a daycare, and I was always worried that my supervisor would find out and I'd be let go. I didn't want anyone to know, and I would often delay treatment even when I needed it because I had a school assignment due, or I couldn't get time off work, or it was Christmas and I didn't want to ruin everyone's holidays. Sometimes the shame and stigma I felt was almost bad as the mental illness symptoms themselves. Now, this began to change in the 2010s when I got a job at MAWA, Mentoring Artists Women's Art, as the first student intern. Everyone there, the staff, members included. Oh, sorry, little problem with the video there.
That was me. Sorry, I spotlighted the interpreter, but
no problem. All fixed up. Right. So everyone there, the staff, the members included, was so accepting and supportive. It really felt like a safe and comfortable environment. And then one day, A&M, back then it was Arts and Disability Network of Manitoba, they rented MAWA's space for their AGM. And I was asked to stay so I could clean and close up after the meeting. This was the first time I'd ever heard of A&M, and I was really intrigued, just as an artist and with my history of mental illness. I've always been a creator since a young age, and I was just beginning to be more comfortable with my diagnosis. So I really thought it was serendipity that I was there for the meeting. Basically, long story short, by the end of the meeting, I was on the board of directors, and after a year, I was the vice chair. So this led me to have my artwork as part of a juried exhibition at the Winnipeg Art Gallery with other artists with disabilities, which was really, in a way, my coming out as an individual with a disability. My work with A&M and MAWA has been so impactful for me. After I graduated with my bachelor's in women and gender studies, I enrolled in the disability master's program at the U of M, where I wrote my dissertation, as Rachel mentioned, about how art can be a tool of empowerment for those with mental illness by exploring my own history. So after I graduated, AANM hired me on as the executive director. And, it had been quite some time since I had worked full time. And, they were really great with allowing me to start with part-time hours. And then over the course of a year, gradually work up to my full-time hours. So now, along with working at AANM, as Rachel mentioned, I am the liaison director for the Manitoba Cultural Society of the Deaf. And then recently, I just became the co-chair of MARC, which is Manitoba Artist Run Center Coalition. Now, the reason that I'm telling all this is because it took me a really long time, not just be comfortable with my diagnosis, but to be proud and actually thankful that I have mental illness. While there are, of course, downsides to mental illness, there are positives. I feel one, it makes me more creative. I'm better able to empathize with others, and it really made me more compassionate and patient with others. And part of creating accessibility for me is sharing the stories of disabilities with others so we can get rid of that stigma and misunderstanding. So that the misunderstandings of disabilities can be addressed and corrected. Now, this comes from a famous disability slogan, "Nothing about us without us." This slogan stems from the fact that historically, those with disabilities have been put into hospitals or homes, studied, dehumanized, and really had their voices taken away from them. Thankfully, this is starting to change, but there's still a lot to do. So one of the first steps is to include those with disabilities in all levels of discussion when you're talking about disability or doing anything to do with the community. The disability community strongly believes that the real experts in disability, it's not the doctors or the health professionals, but those who have lived experiences, those who live with their conditions every day. They're the real experts and know what they need. So basically, this means if you want to know how to be accessible, speak to the community. For example, while I'm really well versed on accessibility for those with mental illness, I'm not an expert on accessibility for those with physical, neurological, or intellectual disabilities. Therefore, when I prepared for this workshop, I reached out to people in those communities to get feedback on the material I prepared. I just really can't emphasize how important that really is. Because still to this day, when people research disability or create accessibility standards, often the disability community is not included in the conversation right from the start. Instead, the standards are created or the research is done, and then the community is asked for the input. And that is just totally backwards and really not acceptable in these days anymore. Therefore, I really urge everyone who is interested in creating a more welcoming and accessible space, talk to the community, reach out to the disability organizations, reach out to AANM, nothing about us without us. So today for this presentation, I will be talking about accessibility both in person and digitally for different disability groups. I'm going to be focusing on accessibility for those who are deaf or hard of hearing, for the blind or low vision community, those with physical disabilities, mental illness, and then intellectual or neurological disabilities. Also, I'm going to be trying to provide new information about accessibility or things you might not have considered. I will not be talking about, the required angles of ramps or how the door has to open. This information is really readily available for anyone who knows how to search the web. And this information and links to these sites will also be included in the resource handout that I'm giving. So you can visit www.accessibilitymb.ca to learn about provincial standards. And if you want to learn about national standards, you just do http://accessible.canada.ca. I should also mention that today, what I speak about will not be complete. An hour is really not enough time to talk about accessibility, even for one group, let alone the entirety of disability. I really hope instead that this workshop will be a catalyst for you to think about accessibility in your space and just to really how to be more welcoming to the deaf and disability community. And being welcoming to our community is important. According to the 2017 Canadian Survey on Disabilities, more than 6 million Canadians aged 15 or over identify as having a disability, which is 22% of the population, which is more than 1 in 5 Canadians. And they also estimate that this number is probably higher, but people are afraid to admit that they have disability because of the stigma attached to it. So they estimate that it's actually 1 in 4 who do have a disability, which is a quarter of the population. So it really makes sense to be welcoming in your space for this community. Okay, so let's jump in. Just a few general information about accessibility. Okay, so first, it's really important to acknowledge and understand and embrace the widespread nature of disability. Disability really touches every demographic, gender, age, race, sexual orientation, etc. And really, it impacts most people eventually, either through accident, illness, or aging. If you live long enough, you will get a disability. It's also important to use appropriate language and etiquette. So here's 2 good rules to keep in mind. 1, always err on the side of language that does not paint disability as inherently negative. So calling someone crazy or psycho, that's not really appropriate. And 2, ask the person, ask them how they want to identify as. With mental illness, some people like to say that they're survivors. Some like to say that they're mad. It's really important to, as I said, speak with the community. Also, many people with disabilities prefer people-first language. That really respects human beings and their strengths rather than defining them by their disabilities. So instead of, someone who's stuck in a wheelchair, it's someone who utilizes a wheelchair. It's an artist with a disability, not a disabled artist, and that sort of thing. All right. Another thing is people with disabilities should not automatically be described as inspirational or courageous. This is something that a lot of people in the community find really difficult to deal with. People with disabilities, we're not stronger or weaker in character than anyone else. This is just what we have to live with, and we adapt. Okay, so let's get into some specifics. So first, we're going to start with talking about the deaf and hard of hearing community. So for the sake of this presentation, when I say deaf, just think that I'm saying deaf and hard of hearing, just so I don't have to repeat that big mouthful every time. Okay, so first off, many deaf individuals do not identify as disabled. This is why I always say the deaf and disability community. The reason why is it's a culture. It's a group identity with their own language, their own art, their own social patterns. And speaking about the language, you should also note that sign language is not English turned into sign. It has its own grammar structure that is actually closer to French and doesn't include words like the, and, or. Next, it's also important to note that every deaf person has individual language preferences, as well as varying degrees of hearing loss. Some individuals can speak for themselves, lip read, use hearing aids, have cochlear implants, or they only use ASL, or a combination of the above. So it's really important to ask people ahead of time what's their preferred method of communication. Also, keep in mind that with a trained interpreter, the deaf individual is getting 80% of the information, and with an untrained interpreter, only 30. So here are a few tips to how to be accessible for the deaf community in person. First, if you're trying to get the attention of someone or a group who are deaf individuals, you can stomp on the floor, you can wave, flash the lights, tap them on the shoulders. Do not wave your hand right in your face. Don't throw things at them. Just be courteous. If you do have ASL interpretation available, that's great. We really try to do that for all of our events ahead of time. But, if you do it by request only, that's fine too. Just having that option there is great. Allow deaf individuals to sit at the front rows. They really need that clear view of the interpreter, so that's very important. Also, always face someone who's deaf when you speak with them, because they might be reading your lips. So it's important to speak naturally without shouting or exaggerating your mouth, because that just distorts things and makes it hard to read. But then again, don't assume that just because someone's deaf, they can lip read. There's many who can't. So, it's also important to have a pen and paper if an interpreter is not there, or download a transcriber app. If you are speaking through an interpreter, make eye contact and speak directly to the deaf individual and not the interpreter. Interpreters are only there to really facilitate communication, and they will remain impartial. They will not answer questions themselves or give advice or add their opinion while they're interpreting. If you are in a group, take turns speaking. And if a deaf individual joins the group, just take a moment to tell them the context, to say, we are talking about so-and-so. If you don't have the context, sometimes it's really hard to jump into the conversation. Now, if there's music involved, they might not be people who are deaf won't hear it, but they can feel it. They can feel the vibrations and really experience the music that way. So consider using a subwoofer that really transmit those vibrations, and have the participants sit right next to the speaker so they can really feel it. Another thing for the hard of hearing community is you got to be aware that on low pressure days, so when it's cloudy or rainy, you're going to have a harder time hearing and understanding. So you really have to be extra patient. And this is something my friend told me, who's hard of hearing. She said that she always misses the punchline of a joke. And that's because of the nature of telling a joke, that when you get to the punchline, you drop your tone. And so they miss out a lot. Okay, and where have I? Sorry, I just lost myself for a minute. All right, okay, so now we're gonna go on to digital accessibility for people who are deaf and hard of hearing. So having ASL for interpretation on online events is great, but it's really important to clearly state on your website and the promotional material that it's available, or people would just assume that it's not. Those who are hard of hearing, they may need closed captioning. But remember that some people use a combination of lip reading and closed captioning. So those captions need to be timed correctly and not lag too far behind. And then also the AI generated captions, such as on Zoom, are accurate about 80% of the time, which really sounds great, but it's not. I really recommend you trying them and practicing it. Put on the transcripts or the closed captioning and mute the sound and see if you can follow along. Because I tell you, I tried and I couldn't do it. And then lastly, if you're putting out an announcement or a call about upcoming events, consider having the information presented as a vlog, which is basically just a video of someone signing the information. Okay, so that's basically all I have for the deaf community. So next, we're gonna talk about accessibility for the blind and low vision community. Same thing as with the deaf community. When I say blind, I mean blind and low vision, but I'm just gonna stick with blind just for brevity's sake. So low vision is defined as uncorrectable vision loss that interferes with daily activities. This means that the blind community is a very diverse group with varying degrees of vision. For example, some people are born with low vision while others acquire it later in life. That means that some people are more comfortable with tactile information, such as braille or raised images. That's more those who are born with low vision, while others prefer audio information, usually those who acquire low vision later on in life. And also another important thing to keep in mind is that some people, especially if they're born blind, they won't have the same frames of references that people who see do. So don't assume that just because someone's blind that they have seen before, because that may not be the case. Right, so here's some general tips. First, never, ever take the arm of someone who's blind. That is just really bad manners. What you need to do is ask them, do they need assistance? And if they do, they take your arm so that you're positioned in front. Because if you take their arm, they're in front of you, and that's dangerous for them. Another thing is do not touch, talk, feed, or otherwise distract guide dogs while they're wearing the harness or vests. You really need to allow the dog to concentrate and perform for the safety of the handler. Don't treat the dog as a pet, because they're not. You really need to respect them as a working dog. All right, so now in terms of tactile or haptic accessibility, which is kind of the term for it, consider allowing those who are blind to touch art objects. Now, I know sanitation is a priority right now, so you could place sanitizer next to objects that need to be touched, or offer gloves. If the artwork is two-dimensional, what you can do is you can create a 2.5D version. So basically, it's just the lines are raised. So you can do this by printing the image and then trace the lines with either puff paint or hot glue to create that tactile sensation. And you can also, of course, use 3D printing, which a lot of major galleries have started doing, to create that raised artwork. And of course, Braille is a really important resource for the visually impaired. In the resource handout, I've included a couple websites for people to look at that provide those Braille surfaces. And then for audio descriptions, audio accessibility, sorry, consider providing descriptions of what you see. So for example, if I'm given a workshop like this, you want to describe yourself and your surroundings. Now I didn't today because I looked at the list and I knew there was no one who was in the blind community that was coming. But so you would say, hi, my name's Jenel. I'm a white woman with medium length brown hair and a ponytail. I have a lot of wonderful artwork around me by artists with disabilities, and I'm wearing a white dress for flowers. So it's that simple. It takes 15, 20 seconds out of your presentation, and it just really helps the blind and low vision community to feel as though they're being welcomed and thought about. Okay, now for art tours. Consider recording yourself, walking through the space, describing the space, describing the artwork, speaking all the written material, such as the artist statement. And now, it's great if you can have your own audio systems that people put on and they carry around, but, not everyone can. But with technology nowadays, you can do that recording on your cell phone and make an audio file that's available through the QR codes that someone just scans into their cell phone. So, it's something to keep in mind that accessibility doesn't have to cost a lot of money. It just takes a little, foresight and creativity. If you're wanting to provide audio descriptions for theater, that's a little bit more difficult. So I would definitely suggest looking into Vocal Eye. They are the first live description art services for the blind in Canada. Their website is a really great resource for services where you can, they'll come down and do a live descriptions for you or provide theater buddies. And you can also have your staff trained how to do this so that you can provide that service on your own. Once again, the Vocal Eye website will be included in the resource handout. Okay, so next, in terms of digital or online accessibility, just because someone's blind or has low vision, some still can't see, but they need certain accommodations. So I'm just going to show you what we did on our website just to make it easier. So we have this little button right here, this little guy here. We had our web designer added it. Now, when you click on that, it has all the accessibility tools. You can make the text really loud so you can see it. You can get rid of the colors. You can have high contrast, negative contrast, a light background. Maybe you need all the links underlined. Maybe you need a readable font. So this is just a really simple tool that people can use, if they need to. 1 second while I pull up my notes again. Okay. Now, lastly, one of the most important features currently to be accessible for the blind is to provide image descriptions on your website. With so many online exhibitions right now, it really is important to provide those descriptions because it really just allows the blind community to really benefit from the arts and interact with the arts. Now, if you haven't done this before, just start with any new images you put up describing. I know when I started to work at AANM, I went back through all of our images and provided descriptions for everyone, and it took weeks. But it's an ongoing thing. So if you just start now and just make it a part of your practice, that's really great. So basically the way it works is that on websites, when you add an image, there's usually an area where you can add some alt text, A-L-T text. So this text, it's only going to be viewed by those who are using a screen reader, or if there's for some reason there's something wrong with the website and the image fails, then that description will be up. So it's good for those two reasons. Now, the thing to remember though is if you're putting a picture in Facebook or an online newsletter, there is no alt text. So in that case, you do have to provide the description just with the post or underneath the image. So here's a few tips for creating effective image descriptions. Write simply, clearly, concisely. Ensure your description is easy to comprehend the first time it's heard. Use language that is descriptive, accurate, appropriate. Locate images and text on the page, such as the upper left-hand corner, in the background. Use complete sentences. Avoid technical terms unless you really need to. Describe what you see with minimal interpretation or personal context. So yeah, those are all really important. All right, so next we're going to talk about accessibility for those with physical disabilities or other invisible disabilities such as fibromyalgia or chronic illnesses like chronic fatigue syndrome. So first, just in general, all staff should be aware of your space's accessibility. I can't tell you how many times I've called a space or a venue to ask if they're wheelchair accessible or if they have a step, and they have no idea. And they seem almost shocked that someone's asking them this advice. That's a really clear way to make the caller feel as though they are not welcome in your space. So it's really important. So here's what every staff should know about your space. Is the entrance on street level? That means no step. If there is a step, how many? Because some people can do 1 or 2 steps, but they might not be able to do 6 or 8. Is there a handrail? Do you have a portable ramp on site? Is there an alternative entrance that is accessible? Are the washrooms accessible? Is there accessible parking nearby? Is the front door automatic? Are the door handles doorknobs, which is not accessible? Or are they levers, which is a lot more accessible? Is the door heavy? Is it light? Do you use chemicals for cleaning? Is the space scent free? With more and more people having allergies and having extreme chemical sensitivities, these are really important things to consider. And then lastly, do caregivers or attendants have to pay entrance fees? A lot of major art galleries and venues are getting better, and they're not charging those attendants because they're not there to experience the art. They're there to facilitate the person that they're with. It's also great to consider if you're doing registration or ticket sales, offer different ways that people can do it online, by phone, in person. That's really important. I know some people with disabilities, because there's such an economic barrier for them, they can't afford laptops and Wi-Fi. So a phone is what they have to connect with. So that's really important. It's also important to ask participants what they need ahead of time. Do they need an assisted listening device? Do they need ASL, captioning, reserves for the front seat, advanced copies of slides, wheelchair access, scent-free room, lactation room, gender-neutral bathrooms, diet restrictions? It's also great to keep a little thing that says other. Just because disability is so evolving and there's always new disabilities that are being recognized, what people need does change. And even people with the same disabilities need different accommodations. So it's really good to have that little space there for someone to input what they need. Now for in-person, keep the interior space neat and organized so that people with limited mobility can really navigate the area. So make sure there's no backpacks in the aisles and that sort of thing. It's also important to make sure there's seating available throughout the entire of the event, including those parts where most people typically stand. Some people with individual or chronic illnesses and disabilities, they can tire really easy and they'll need to rest more often than others. Right. Remember also that even accessible washrooms can present challenges. The standards aren't always 100%. So if you have a friend who's in a wheelchair, maybe a push wheelchair and a power wheelchair, have them come to your space, test out the washrooms, test out the area so you can really see what's working and what's not. Encourage staff and guests to refrain from using scented products that I mentioned before. That's very important nowadays. And also, if the space is not accessible, is there an alternative way for people to participate? So we've all seen with the pandemic that it's really possible to provide that digital content. So when things do go back to normal, try to keep the online content. It is so important. I know for me, I've been able to participate in more events than ever because of that online content. I have anxiety issues around being out after dark. And a lot of art openings are in the evening, and I feel really uncomfortable. So I've been able to participate so much more with all this online content. Another thing is, do you have staff that can meet customers outside of your inaccessible space to provide those services? Do you have curbside pickup and all those things? Now, of course, some people might want to update their space. So if you're looking to find funding, there's two main areas that I would look at. First of all, the province has recently announced that they are creating a 20 million endowment fund that will provide municipalities, businesses, and organizations help to eliminate barriers to their services. This is going to be managed by the Winnipeg Foundation. And so, yes, that's going to be available in spring 2022. Sorry, so many twos. Yeah, so keep an eye out for that. There's also the Enabling Accessibility Fund from the Government of Canada, and they help with small to mid-level updates up to about 3 million per project. The link to that site will be in the resource handout, so no worries. Now, if we're talking about online accessibility for people with physical disabilities, it's really important to show people with disabilities in the photographs, in the infographics, any images on your website, social media materials, just to really show that you want the community there. Make it obvious that your policies are inclusive. Promote the steps that you're taking to make it more inclusive. Websites and social media accounts should make it clear your efforts are important, intentional, and ongoing. Also, please put on your website what your accessibility level is. Saying that you're accessible is just not enough. People need to know, can they physically enter the space? Can they navigate the entire space? Are there areas they can't? Are the washrooms accessible? Is there seating throughout? All of that stuff is just really important. And even if your space is not accessible, put that up there, because it's better to know ahead of time. There's nothing worse than getting all excited and you're going to this event and you get there and there's steps and you can't even go in. It's just, so even if you are inaccessible, just say it. It's worth it. And then lastly, if you are an artist-run organization, there is a portable ramp that's available for free to make your space accessible for your events. All you have to do is go to Video Pool Media Center on their website under their equipment stuff, and it's listed there. And you can just call and contact them and rent it free of charge. So now we are on to accessibility for those with mental illness. So for this one, I'm going to be talking about accommodations for staff as well, because that's really important. People with disabilities, we're not just your patrons or your audience. We're your staff. We are the executive directors now. We're there, so it's important to make those accommodations. So let your staff use sick days as mental health days. My organization is really great for that. I'm rarely sick. I have a great immune system, but mentally I have days where I can't do anything. And so it's great that I can use those for mental health days. And also, let staff take a leave of absence and retain their job if they have to get admitted to the hospital. Just how you wouldn't punish someone if they had a heart attack or they had a serious accident, don't punish someone for handling the mental health responsibly. That's just so important. It's also great to offer relaxed performances. People with mental illness such as schizophrenia and borderline personality disorder, or anything really, experience anxiety and that sort of thing. So it's great to have those options. If we're talking about online accessibility, your site should be intuitive and easy to use so people don't get too anxious using your site. And yeah, as I mentioned before, offer online programming for those with anxiety or other health conditions who just can't attend in person. And the last thing for in person, if someone is having a mental health crisis, just do your best to de-escalate the situation. Offer them a place to sit away from people. If you have the time, just talk with them. And if you feel that they need professional help, first step, contact some mental health support, such as the Crisis Stabilization Unit. I have their number and email on the resource sheet. And if you can, avoid calling the police. It's kind of the best. The police can be very triggering, and we've seen, recently how a lot of times when the police get involved, they don't de-escalate. They, can be very dangerous for someone with mental illness. Of course, if they are threatening to hurt themselves or others, then absolutely, you need to call the police to do this, to handle the situation. But the big thing is, just be patient and caring. Often people, they just want to know that they're in a safe place and that somebody is willing to listen. All right, so now, last but not least, we're going to talk about accessibility for those with intellectual or neurodiverse disabilities. So the same as before, simple words with simple directions. If you have a really wordy document with big terms, consider having a second document that has really simplified language. If we're talking about digital accessibility, the ability to turn on and off captions is really important. Some people need to have the captions and some find it really distracting. Allow large format text so people can see it better and really understand. If we're talking about in person, allow attendants to attend free of charge. Consider having a quiet space for those that need a break if they're overstimulated and just need to calm down. Allow extra time for people to enter the space before the event begins. Create an experience guide of your venue for people to view ahead of time. And speaking about experience guides, I'm going to share with you guys an exceptional experience guide that was created by the Education and Community Engagement Program at the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra. If you have any questions about this guide and anything like that, Brent Johnson, who is the Community and Education Engagement Manager, has welcomed questions. His contact information will be in the resource handout that you guys can look at. So now we're just going to go through so that you can see kind of what it looks like and why it's so great. Okay. So the first one that we're going to look at is the Relaxed Concert Guide. Now, what this does is it really shows people ahead of time what to expect when they visit the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra. And this is important for people, with mental illness, for people with neurodiversity, to really feel comfortable and know what to expect. Great. So here it is. I will be attending the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra concert. What to expect. Okay, so when's the date? Well, here it is. This is when it's going to happen. This is when the doors are opening. Where is it? Here's a picture. This is what the concert hall looks like. This is what it looks like from a different angle. And here's another angle. They really show all around what it looks like. They also mentioned that this is where the parkade is, so people know where to park. They talk about how you get to the space. You can bike, taxi, bus, or take a car. And so, they show you how to access the stuff that they have around there. So they have bike racks. There's bike racks here on Main Street. There's some more on Market Avenue. Here's some in the underground. And then here's some more nearby. And then taxis. Here's where you get dropped off if you take the taxi. Buses. This lists all the buses you can take. And this one's right in front of the concert hall. They also list another bus stop on the other side. And it tells you that you get off and then you cross the street. They make it really clear and simple where everything is. Here's another bus stop. And the great thing about this guide is it took a bit of time and ingenuity, but it's really just walking around your space, taking the pictures, and just putting together a PDF for people to help them through. So great, this is the front doors. Now we're starting, okay, now you got here, how do you get in? Well, here's the steps. Great, well, what if you can't get in the steps? No problem, look at this. Here's another entrance for you. And another entrance. They show all the different ways you can get into the space. Once you get into space, what's next? Well, it's the box office. So it shows you, here's where you buy tickets if you haven't. If you have, if you already have tickets, then what you're going to do is you're going to give them to the ushers. So after you go into the main lobby, there's the doors. This is where you wait until it's time to open the doors. The usher will take my ticket and they're going to give it back to me, which is great. Now we're looking at the inside of the space. This is what it looks like. Here's some images. They show you where the coat check is. So you know where to find it. They tell you the cost. It's just $1. Okay, so now we're waiting. The concerts were in the place. We've done our code. What's next? Well, maybe I want a little snack. So it tells you where all the coffee bars are, little drinks. It tells you where you can get some assistive hearing devices. So it tells you go to guest services and it tells you where it's located. Wheelchairs. What if you're having a rough day? You're someone with chronic illness and you just can't walk today? No problem. They have you covered. They have some wheelchairs that are available free of charge. All right, now how do you get around the space? Well, there's lots of ways to get around the WSO. So here we have the different stairs. We have just the different signs that kind of tell you where everything is, really explaining it. They have elevators. This is where some elevators that anybody can use. Here's some more stairs. Some ramps. These are different ramps you can get into the area. This is really great. This is an accessible elevator. Now, sometimes people with disabilities are in power wheelchairs and they can't reach out and push that button to get in. So this is an elevator that an usher uses to help operate the elevator for them, to help them find their seat, which is just really wonderful. They also talk about announcements. Now, this is important because people who have autism, for example, loud noises can be really jarring. So this lets them know ahead of time, there will be some announcements, there will be sounds, but that's okay. When I hear this, that means I should go to my seat. So it's really making somebody comfortable about what's gonna happen in the space. All right, it shows you what the tickets look like. It shows you what all the sections, the row, the seat, what all those numbers mean, really explains it perfectly. They talk about the portals. Okay, the show's gonna start. How do I get in there? It shows you how to get in. If you are getting accessible seating, you don't take the stairs, you can just go right in, which is great. It shows you the row numbers. This is where you're gonna find it. This is where the seat number is, right there. They're really clear on where all these things are. It also tells you where the accessible seating is. It tells you the portals, the rows, and how to navigate. Right here, it shows you this is where a spot where someone with a wheelchair can sit. Seating, this is what it looks like. This is what the inside looks like. The stage, this shows you what the stage looks like, a couple different angles. Washrooms, very important, people to know ahead of time. Some people might have bladder issues or just need to use the water more frequently or have more emergencies where they need to use it quickly. So to know this information ahead of time is really great. They have some family washrooms, which is great for people who are being an attendant and caring for someone and need to have that bigger space to help them. They also talk about the pre-concert chat. They always have a little discussion where they talk about the symphony, what's going on. Sometimes you hear music. So it's great for people to know about that ahead of time. Okay, great. So now the concert's going to begin. Now, this is really cool. They say that the lights will dim a bit, but they won't go out, which is really great. It's kind of nice to have that reading light level for people. It really takes away some of the anxiety that some people feel. So it's really great. It tells you what's going to happen. Someone's going to come out and they're going to talk about it. And then I'm going to hear the music. And they talk about who's going to be there. The orchestra is going to be there. This is what it looks like. Here's the conductor. He's the leader. He's the one who directs the music. During the concert, this is great. It tells you, here's what you can do during the concert. You can sit in your seat and look. But you know what? If you want to get up and dance, you can. Just, make sure you're not blocking anyone behind you. But it's very more relaxed. If you don't want to be close, you can move back. If you're too far back and you want to go closer, you can do those things, which is really great for a relaxed performance. Another important thing, they have a quiet space. So this quiet space is a little bit darker. You won't hear the music so much. You can relax. There's also a washroom available, so you don't have to leave the space to use the washroom, which is great. Okay, so there's the washroom. Here's some more of what the red room looks like. All right, and then emergency exits, of course, very important. So it tells you where to look. You got to look for that little exit thing. That's where you go. They also tell you about, what's not permitted. So turn your cell phone off. Put it on silent. Don't take pictures during the concert. Don't wear scents. They make it very, very clear. If you have a service animal, no problem. Bring them along. And that's the end for that guide. So the next one I'm going to share with you is the concert experience. So this is a shorter document that they put together, but this is more specific to each relaxed concert. So this one really goes into detail with what's the event that I'm attending. What's the schedule? What's going to happen? First, this time this happens, and then you can go in, and then you can sit down, and then someone's going to talk. It tells you how long everything's going to be. It's about 55 minutes. It tells you some helpful information. That the lights will be left at reading levels. If you need a quiet space, this is where you go. Just really great. It also talks about, Czech music is really lively. So there's going to be a lot of music and dancing. And, it also goes into more detail about what the orchestra looks like. This is how it's organized. Just really giving that background information to people so they can really enjoy and relax during the performance. They go into more information specifically about each piece and how long it's going to be and how was the piece created and what does it mean. This is just really great. Yeah. So basically, that's a really great example of something that, it takes a bit of time, but it doesn't cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to be accessible, which is really great. So that's basically the end of my talk. If anyone has any questions or comments, feel free to unmute yourself, turn your video on, or anything.
I wish I could start my video to say that was great, Jenel, but yeah, I really loved that example you gave from the WSO. That was super great.
Yeah, they did such an amazing job with that. Yeah, it's just wonderful. And yeah, Brent Johnson from there said, if you have any questions, just, send him an email. It'll be in the resource guide. What I might do is put those two resources for those who would like it now in the chat so people can download them ahead of time if they would like. So I'm going to put that there.
But yeah, anyone who has a question, just turn your camera on and mute yourself. You could also use the chat if that's more to your liking.
Great.
We'd love to see people's faces. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I think disabled. But like the video is not able. I'm not able to undo the video. But I just have a question in terms of language. I recently heard of. I'm Nicole Shimanek. I'm at Manitoba Arts Network. Okay, I can do it.
There we go. Sorry, that was me. Hi.
I just recently learned of the word like neurodivergent and
neurodiversity.
Yeah, neurodiversity. And is the language now because like that I always really struggle with like when you're connecting with people that would have like have a disability in terms of like is that the correct language that you would use? Is that person maybe would like if they would identify themselves as neurodivergent, or when you're working for an organization that has
it's really, like I said, it's really individual to the person. It is moving more towards neurodiverse and neurodiversity. That's kind of the terms people are using now instead of autistic. And you know, and then that sort of thing. But it's really depends on the individual, and also language is so changing all the time. So it's constantly evolving. So it's, you know, you just really got to keep abreast. You know, like a lot of people now are trying to reclaim the word crip and really, you know, crip rights and that sort of thing. So while in the past calling someone a crip would not be good, and it's still kind of iffy, but you know, it's always changing. So I think the best thing is always just to connect with the community and to really ask the individuals what they prefer. The individuals that I did talk to who have neurological disabilities, that's the term that they really like right now is neurodiverse. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's what
that,
I'm starting to
yeah.
see, that's like more like, yeah, when you're explaining that you're, you know, you're connecting with like the neurodivergent.
Yeah.
So.
And neurodiverse also means, you know, mental illness as well. You know, we're also part of the neurodiversity movement. But yeah, it's just really important to check with the individual because everyone's different about what they like.
Cool, thank you.
No problem. And I see Koi J says, hi, Jenel, do you know any accessible apps that can help with accessibility, such as apps for closed captioning content? I don't know about too many apps. I know about some websites. So there's rev.com and otter.ca, I think. I put it in the resource handout. And so they help with closed captioning and live closed captioning. In terms of apps, having a transcriber is great if you're speaking with someone who's deaf, because you can talk into that and then you can show it to them. There's also an app, I think it's called Access Now. Don't quote me on that though. And that's an app, it's more in Europe, but we're gonna start, I think, seeing it here more. And it tells the accessibility of different spaces. So, which, you know, it's just talking about accessibility of spaces. AANM is doing a project over the summer where we're reaching out to the different disability groups to create an audit for spaces that's created by and for people with disabilities. And so once we create that, we'll be visiting spaces and creating a database that will hopefully become an app that people can use to learn about accessibility. So hopefully I answered your question for you, Koi. Sorry, I'm not too big on apps, so I'm new at that. We still have a couple more minutes if anyone has any questions, comments. You guys like, I have all this artwork behind me. This is all artists with disabilities from the organization. So yeah, it's, you know, we really creative and diverse type of artwork. It's just a really wonderful community to be a part of.
I just want to say that's super exciting about the survey that you're doing of all the arts organizations.
Yeah, it should be really great. So yeah, it's being funded by the Cinnabon Credit Union. Courtney?
Yeah, I actually wanted to ask if you could give a little more details to that, or if there's any sort of way to get involved in that.
Absolutely, yeah. So we're just in the process right now of reaching out to different disability organizations. We're also going to be putting out a call on AANM's website and newsletter. I think you're part of the newsletter, Courtney. I remember seeing you on there. So we're going to put a call out to our members as well who want to participate. So yeah, we're just going to have these different, you know, roundtables to just, you know, so many audits nowadays, like I said, they're created by the architects, the doctors. It's not by the community themselves, and they really know what they need. So this is going to be such a great tool to just really evaluate art spaces and to let people know how they can improve their space, you know. And when we do update it in the database and they say, hey, you know what, we've made these changes you suggested, we'll go back and we'll reevaluate and then we'll change it. It just makes it easier for people to, you know, to know about stuff ahead of time, what the resources they need, all in one place, easy to see. And like I said, it's just really, I think, groundbreaking because it's going to be coming built by people with disabilities the whole way through. You know, the leaders, everyone involved has disabilities. Yeah, I'm really excited for it. It's going to be a really great project.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me. That's like what I want to do my master's in. So that's why I was like,
great. Well, then, you know what, you should participate in some way, even if you just volunteer to sit in on the sessions or something. Or
yeah, so that will be in the newsletter that you'll
yeah, I'll put it out in the newsletter. Yeah, and I now that I know you're interested, I'll also email you separately with some information.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. So we got about 5 more minutes if anybody has any questions or comments.
Sorry,
Yeah.
this is not actually a new question, but I
No.
also would really be interested in like,
Great.
you know, volunteering to transcribe or whatever is
Yeah, that would
helpful
be
for that.
wonderful.
So
Great.
thank
Are
you.
you part of our membership?
I don't think so, actually. The organization that I work for gets your newsletter. So I was
Okay.
just about to send you an email from my personal to
I was just
introduce.
going to put great. So I'm going to put my email also in the chat for anyone who wants to contact me for anything. Email is really the best way. I have a hard time with phones. I need to see someone. I'm very visual, so I have a hard time on the phone, but please email me if you want to know anything, really. It's yeah, and this project's going to be really great, really great. So I'll give people one more minute. If there's no more comments and questions, then, you know, we might end a couple minutes early, which is fine. You know, it's such a lovely weekend and hopefully everyone's staying cool.
We have a thank you from Nicole and from Susan.
Hello.
Hello. Hi, Mom.
Hi. I don't know how to turn my video on.
Oh, don't worry, Mom. I can do it for you.
Okay.
Sorry, this is just my mother. There you go. Did you see
I
it?
say
You gotta
okay.
click. You say okay. Yep.
Oh, okay.
Hi.
I just wanted to say, I really like how you started your presentation. I think it's really important to identify about mental health issue and how it's just starting to come out and people are feeling more comfortable to talk about that. I think that's really important. So, and then your whole presentation was very informative. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mom. My mom is so supportive. She was a psychiatric nurse. So it was really, really great for me to have that support at home while I was going through my stuff. Great. So I think we're at the end. So if everybody, you know, if you want to turn on your videos and wave and say hi, feel free. We'll just say goodbye to everyone. Hello, Sophie. Hi, guys.
Hi, Auntie
I have
Janelle.
such a supportive family. Hi, Savvy. You guys are so cute. Oh, my
Oh, this is the heartwarming content that I need right now. Thank you.
Well, I think we'll wrap it up. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in and joining. And I hope you all learned, you know, something new to really just kind of, you know, spark that curiosity on how to be accessible. So
Awesome.
thank you,
Thank you.
everyone. And yeah, go ahead, Rachel.
I'll just say thanks, Janelle. This has
Yes.
been super great. And
Great.
here's
Yeah,
all around.
thank you very much, Janelle.
Thanks, guys. Have
Bye.
a great day.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.